businesses fail? How is it that large companies with vast resources, thousands of employees, can fail in the face of seemingly insignificant competition? How about that? So if you're keeping pace, we're talking about how businesses fail, why they fail, why they fail in the face of seemingly insignificant competition. How is it that a company like Kodak, which once had 140,000 employees, could fail and stumble in the face of competition like Instagram? A company that when it sold for $1 billion had just 13 employees. 140,000. These are the kind of business stories that I think should give us all reason to pause, and the kinds of stories that are becoming all too commonplace as technology and the workplace converge. But I worry because when we write these stories of corporate failure, we write them as stories of size and speed. Large companies that fail to move fast enough to keep up with the competition. But I think while that's part of the answer, it's an imperfect framework with which to design new businesses and prepare old ones to be more resilient for the future. Because if it's just about speed, well, many of our businesses are actually quite good at that. Many of the companies that we might work at, many of the jobs that we have, are designed with a production era understanding of work and the value that each employee provides. We have certain tasks and procedures, and we repeat them, and we value them based on efficiency. But the challenge that technology poses is not one of speed or efficiency, it's one of ingenuity. Because there's a fact that we all must get used to in life, that for each of us, whether the task be the rote memory of a doctor, or the task is the manual labor of a line worker, or the intuition of an accountant, our future is one where those tasks and that repetition is actually best left to hardware and software. And so what we need to measure ourselves against ingenuity. And in that world, our businesses need a better framework. And it's in that I think we can find inspiration from the most unlikely of characters, the Daphnia flea. The Daphnia flea is this crustacean. It does this remarkable thing. Under normal circumstances, what the Daphnia flea will do is reproduce asexually, which is effectively making copies of itself over and over again. And it does this task with incredible efficiency. But it's under times of stress, adversity, drought, less food, low temperature, that we really see its wonder. It switches from asexual reproduction to sexual reproduction, a task that is less efficient, but has important advantages. And one of those advantages is that the genetic variation in subsequent generations of Daphnia flea, in that lies the genetic answer to the environmental riddle the Daphnia flea is trying to solve. And I think it's a shame that the average biology student in first year knows the story of the Daphnia flea and well understands the process, natural selection, that gives rise and resilience to this creature and other species. But the average business leader, the average business designer, either this process is unknown or just unused in our design. And in an age where we need more ingenuity than ever, I think we can look to nature as a wonderful example and a valuable framework for how our organisms, our large organizations, can be more resilient. And I think we can learn a lot from nature in many different ways, but I want to talk about three today. They're decentralization, experimentation, and fluidity. Let's talk a little bit about decentralization. So when I first started my career, I had the great fortune to find myself at a very large company, a company that was originally founded in the 1800s. And over that time, it launched many new products and spanned out across the globe, and was incredibly successful. It was a true redwood in the forest. But when I joined, and hopefully not because I joined, we actually faced some tough times. We had a few challenging years where we knew we needed fresh thinking and new ideas. And so we got out our managerial playbook, because most of us were business students, and we knew that the way to solve this problem was twofold. We need to delegate, right? And then we need to throw resources at the problem. So we did delegate. We created a manager whose sole job it was to think of innovation, to think up new ideas, new ways of doing business for us. And the second thing we did was throw money at the problem. We put millions of dollars in an annual pool, and we had one VP whose job it was to meet with a committee every few months and decide which ideas to implement. And we were surprised months and years later that these things didn't make us any more competitive, didn't make our thinking any more fresh. And we were surprised then, but now, looking back through the lens of what we can see in the natural world, I'm far less surprised. Because what we did, everything we did, we centralized ideation. We had one person whose real job it was to think about new ideas for our company. We had one committee that actually had the resources to put new ideas out into the world. And in fact, compared to natural ecosystems and species, whether they be tigers or termites, that's not what happens. In tigers and termites, the DNA that's inside each and every member of that species is the genetic code and the genetic responsibility to ideate. And the species survives without arbitrary limits on any individual member's ability to innovate or come up with new ideas. And so if we had actually designed our process and our systems to ensure that every single employee, from the line manager through to the president, had an obligation and a responsibility to come up with new ideas, we may have been better off. And we would have been better off had we given them all the resources to actually put those ideas into action. And this is where the concept of experimentation comes in. Because when I talk to people about the idea of everyone being responsible and everyone having the ability and the resources to put these ideas into action, that's when we get scared, right? Because I can certainly trust my ideas, but I don't know about the ideas of the people in the front row over here. And I don't know about your ideas, and I'm sure it's the same with you. When you have an organization with hundreds, thousands, some with millions of people inside them, how can we possibly trust the chaos that ensues with giving everyone the resources and the responsibility to come up with new ideas? And indeed, we would be right that this chaos is troubling. And that is if we keep a modern day understanding of what ideas really are about. Because for most businesses, new ideas take form in the shape of something like a new product. And we invest heavily behind them. We have departments for research and development. We spend years, millions of dollars on these things. And we close them off to the outside world, and we protect them with patents and secrecy. And what we're doing is the exact opposite of how species and ecosystems thrive outside of our doors. When I was young, I used to marvel at the wisdom of maple trees. The wisdom of maple trees. Because standing under a maple tree, it's hard not to be fascinated how it can conceive of such a perfect, big idea as the maple tree seed. A pod on one end, and then the flat, smooth surface on the other. Designed so perfectly that when it falls, it rotates like a helicopter blade and maintains enough lift to carry it away from the central tree, ensuring that subsequent generations aren't competing with the current generation for resources, sunlight, water, and so on. And so staring up at this inanimate object, seemingly inanimate object, it's hard not to be fascinated. But had we designed our businesses to think about ideas as small, we could have learned from the maple tree, because the fact is, there's no maple tree out there with that kind of wisdom. There was no day where a maple tree said, this seed 1.0 is inadequate. I have designed seed 2.0, and here it is, world. And oh, it worked. That's great. No, the maple tree and species all over the world would never take such a gamble with their own livelihood. And yet we do so with businesses each and every day. And what we're seeing now, and some of it is actually the benefit of technology is that we're seeing businesses that are thriving because they're co-opting this strategy of experimentation, a strategy of prototyping that happens in our DNA all around the world. And we're seeing things like the Google search page, the search results page, or an Amazon homepage, or we've seen this with startups all over the world, where it's actually a bit of a fallacy to say, hey, I'm on the Google search results page, or I'm on the Amazon homepage. Because what these businesses are doing at all times, sometimes in the foreground, sometimes in the background, subtle hints of an algorithm change, they're experimenting in real time with real customers. And like the maple tree, it's these small iterative tests that if they work, then they are scaled up and become bigger and bigger ideas and become something that is much more recognizable to us as a new finished product. And so those are the first two things that we need to do. We need to decentralize more. We need to experiment more as opposed to having these big gambles. But it still doesn't solve the problem of two ideas coming together and forming something new, because that's all ideas really are. And what we need for that is a concept of fluidity, something that allows ideas within our network to actually come together. Because what happens in most businesses, and many of you who are out in the working world, you'll see this, right? You'll get a job offer and say, you've now been accepted into the marketing department. And you come in and you work as part of the marketing team. And oh, by the way, the marketing team works over here. And if you're lucky, this is your office. And here are the doors to your office and the walls around your office. And if you need to save your ideas, your files, you save them over here. And you can password protect them over here. And no one else will be able to find them. And what we're doing is actually preventing ideas from connecting. You take two penguins, put them on an island. How many different mating pairs could we have? Well, just the one. We've got the two penguins there, right? We scale that up to hundreds of penguins. And all of a sudden, we're now in a world where genetically the number of mating pairs is well into the thousands. And in fact, that's what we see in the natural world all around us, is that as species and herds get bigger and bigger, they don't implement arbitrary barriers, things that are derived just for efficiency. They maintain a network, a genetic idea that starts between two penguins over here on this side of the island, through subsequent generations, if good, can spread through the rest of the species. And yet every time as businesses, when we develop our organisms, we create barriers. We create those departments. We create chains of command that prevent people from talking to each other. We give physical barriers to our physical surroundings. We create virtual ones to say these things are protected and you can't see them. And the list goes on and on and on. And we do so to try to gain efficiency, but it stands in the way of our ingenuity. And so that's the last thing, is fluidity. We need to maintain that fluidity. And to me, it's perhaps the most powerful lesson of all, because it's as businesses scale that chaos ensues. And it's our first temptation as business leaders, and frankly, just as people, to try to understand those businesses a bit better. And so we add those structures in. And I think if we learned a bit more from nature, we will be able to be more selective when we do so, such that we maintain ingenuity and not just efficiency. Now, learning from nature is not a new concept. And in fact, in engineering circles all over the world, with a concept of biomimicry, we're doing this all the time. We're stealing nature's answers all the time. So if you're trying to make a tall skyscraper in Dubai more energy efficient and have a better air conditioning system, well, why not look to termite mounds to see how they solve a similar problem? If you're trying to take a jetliner and make it bigger and stronger, but yet faster and lighter, why not look to the cartilage structures of birds and sharks? And the list goes on and on and on. We can take answers from nature and apply them to our world. And I think you can choose your metaphor and you can choose your example in business, because for smaller businesses or larger businesses in different industries facing certain problems, the examples from nature are many. But what's important is this, that the core lesson in the framework is that as nature scales, it doesn't trade efficiency, it doesn't trade ingenuity for efficiency. And that's the real lesson and the real challenge of our times. That what we're moving towards, regardless of the framework that you have in your minds about how businesses should be designed, is a future where the value that we add as individuals is about our ideas. Because whether it's robotic drones that can deliver packages and parcels right to your doorstep within 30 minutes, whether it's a Coca-Cola bottling factory and the robots that we see there, whether it's a better algorithm for connecting doctors to knowledge all around the world, what we're seeing is tasks, repetition, things that can be programmed and automated will be more so. And so the value that we add is all about ingenuity. And so that is why I believe that we should look to nature, because nature is ingenuity all around us. And so in this, the next evolution of business, I think we need more evolution in business. Businesses that are designed to operate much more like rainforests and coral reefs, systems that thrive on ingenuity, and systems that operate a lot more like our natural DNA and not like our corporate DNA. Thank you.